Imagine walking through the streets of a medieval city in the middle of summer. The air is hot. The smell of sickness hangs over the narrow alleys. Food is scarce. Disease is everywhere. And fear has become part of daily life. Then suddenly, in the middle of the street, a woman begins to dance. At first, it seems strange but harmless. But she doesn't stop. She dances for hours, then days. Soon, others join her. Within weeks, hundreds of people are dancing uncontrollably in the streets of Strasbourg. Some collapse from exhaustion. Some die. And no one can explain why. This is the story of the Dancing Plague of 1518. One of the strangest mass events in recorded history. A mystery that sits somewhere between medicine, psychology, religion, and collective fear. And even after 5 centuries, historians are still trying to understand what really happened. To understand the Dancing Plague, we first need to understand the world in which it happened. The year was 1518. And the city of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, was under immense pressure. The people of the region had endured years of failed harvests, skyrocketing grain prices, outbreaks of plague, the spread of syphilis, and extreme weather. For ordinary people, survival had become increasingly difficult. Famine and disease were not rare tragedies, they were constant threats. At the same time, the religious world was beginning to fracture. In 1517, Martin Luther challenged the authority of the Catholic Church, sparking tensions across Europe. People feared not only starvation and illness, but also divine punishment. To many, the world seemed to be collapsing. Strasbourg was a city living in fear. Fear of disease, fear of God, fear of the future. And in that atmosphere of stress and desperation, something extraordinary happened. According to historical accounts, it began on July 14th, 1518. A woman known as Frau Trophäa stepped into the street outside her home and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration, no visible reason. She twisted, spun, and convulsed uncontrollably. She danced until she collapsed from exhaustion. Then she got up and danced again. Her husband reportedly begged her to stop, but she couldn't. By the second day, her feet were swollen and bleeding. By the third, crowds had gathered to watch. And within a week, dozens of others had joined her. They danced for days on end, despite pain, dehydration, and total exhaustion. This was not joyous dancing. It was frantic, compulsive, and terrifying. The dancers screamed in pain, begged for help, and yet continued moving as if they had no control over their bodies. What began as one woman's inexplicable behavior had become a public crisis. By August, the number of afflicted had risen dramatically. Some reports estimate that as many as 400 people were dancing in the streets. Contemporary records describe men, women, and children dancing in marketplaces, alleys, and public squares, day and night. Some witnesses claimed that up to 15 people a day were dying, collapsing from heart attacks, strokes, dehydration, or sheer exhaustion. And the strangest part was this. The records are clear about what happened. People danced uncontrollably, but no one knew why. Physicians wrote about it. Religious leaders preached about it. City officials documented it. Yet, the cause remained a mystery. To the people of Strasbourg, it seemed supernatural, and their response reflected that belief. City authorities consulted local physicians, hoping for an explanation. The doctors concluded that the victims were suffering from something they called hot blood. Their solution? More dancing. They believed the only cure was for the dancers to keep moving until the fever burned itself out. So the city did something astonishing. Officials built wooden stages. They hired musicians. They even brought in professional dancers to encourage the afflicted. The idea was to help them dance the illness away. Instead, it made everything worse. The public performances drew crowds. More people became involved. The dancing spread further. The city's attempt to solve the problem may have amplified it. Only later did the authorities reverse course, banning public dancing and shutting down the music. But by then, the crisis had spiraled. Religion soon became central to the response. Many people believed the dancers had been cursed by Saint Vitus, a Christian saint associated with neurological disorders and involuntary movement. The condition became known as Saint Vitus's dance. People believed the victims were being punished for sin. Some even thought that joining the dancing might help lift the curse. Eventually, the authorities sent the afflicted to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus. There, the dancers underwent rituals of repentance. They wore red shoes sprinkled with holy water. Crosses were painted on their feet. Priests performed prayers, blessings, and incantations, and gradually, the dancing stopped. By September, the epidemic had disappeared as mysteriously as it began. No disease was identified, no poison was found. The plague simply ended. So what actually happened? Over the centuries, scholars have proposed several explanations. One early theory was ergot poisoning. Ergot is a toxic mold that can grow on rye and cause muscle spasms, hallucinations, and convulsions. Because medieval bread often contained rye, some researchers suggested contaminated grain might have triggered the outbreak. At first, this seemed plausible, but the theory has problems. Ergot poisoning usually causes gangrene, seizures, and intense pain, not coordinated dancing that lasts for days. It also tends to incapacitate victims quickly. The Strasbourg dancers were moving continuously in large groups. That makes ergot poisoning unlikely. Another idea is that the dancers were part of a religious cult or ritual. Some scholars proposed that secret sects may have used ecstatic dancing as a spiritual act, but there is little evidence to support that theory either. The most widely accepted explanation today is mass psychogenic illness, sometimes called mass hysteria. This occurs when extreme psychological stress causes real physical symptoms in groups of people, even though there is no physical disease causing it. The symptoms are genuine. The pain is real, but the trigger is psychological. In Strasbourg, the population was living under extraordinary stress: famine, disease, fear of divine punishment, and social instability. People already believed in curses like Saint Vitus's dance. In that environment, one person's breakdown could spread rapidly through suggestion, fear, and belief. Historian John Waller argues that this is the most likely explanation. The people of Strasbourg were so overwhelmed by trauma that it manifested physically. The body expressed what the mind could no longer contain. And once the public rituals ended and people were removed from the social environment fueling the panic, the epidemic faded. As strange as the dancing plague sounds, it was not unique. Europe experienced multiple outbreaks of dancing mania between the 14th and 17th centuries. One of the earliest occurred in 1374, when large groups of people across towns along the Rhine River danced uncontrollably for days. Another account from 1021 describes villagers in Germany dancing wildly outside a church until they collapsed. These events were often linked to religious fear, stress, and social unrest. The Strasbourg outbreak of 1518 was simply the largest and best documented, which makes it one of the clearest examples of how deeply collective belief can shape human behavior. The legacy of the dancing plague continues today because it raises unsettling questions. How does stress affect the human body? How much of our physical experience is shaped by social belief? What happens when fear spreads faster than understanding? The people of Strasbourg were not irrational. They were responding to unimaginable hardship using the beliefs available to them. Their bodies became the stage on which fear, trauma, and faith played out. That may be what makes the story so disturbing, because while the details are medieval, the underlying forces are not. We still see forms of mass panic today. We still see communities gripped by fear. We still see the body respond to collective anxiety in powerful ways. The dancing plague reminds us that the line between mind and body is far thinner than we often assume. 500 years later, the streets of Strasbourg are quiet. The music is gone. The dancers are gone. But the mystery remains. Was it disease? Poison? Religious terror? Collective trauma? Perhaps the answer is a combination of all of these. Whatever the cause, the dancing plague of 1518 stands as one of history's strangest warnings, that under enough pressure, entire communities can lose control in ways that seem impossible, and that the human mind, especially under fear, is capable of extraordinary things. Sometimes, the strangest epidemics are not caused by viruses or bacteria, but by belief itself. And that may be the most haunting explanation of all. Thanks for watching.